say where we are right now?
Yeah. So, actually I didn't notice the town. Is this, Three Forks maybe? Three Forks Junction?
A couple of weeks ago, my colleagues, reporter Liz Goodwin and producer Laura Benshoff, took a reporting trip to Montana.
So we're in Three Forks Junction. There's a big gas station, and then there's this cute little bakery. And we're going to try to get some people to talk to us about the Senate race.
They posted up at that gas station, surrounded by plains and farmland. And that is where Liz flagged down a rancher named Wiley Gustafson.
Hi. Are you a Montana resident by any chance?
I'm a Montana resident.
We're trying to talk to people about the Senate race for a podcast. Would you...
You probably don't want to hear what
we do. We want to hear what everyone...
So Gustafson, in many ways, is exemplifying this old school Montana political type where he's conservative, but he's also voted for Democrats in the past. And he also identifies a little bit as a libertarian. He also just had a really interesting backstory.
Okay, great.
One other bit of information that will surprise you guys. I am the Yahoo yodeler. Did you ever hear it? Yahoo!
You are not.
Yeah, I am. You can look at it.
He told us that yodeling was huge in the 90s, and there were a lot of advertisements that wanted yodelers.
TV commercials. It was surf, guitar, and yodeling. So I did a bunch of commercials.
Yodeling notwithstanding, Gustafson had thoughts about the Senate race, because this is a tight one. There's a Democratic incumbent, Senator Jon Tester, a self-described Montana dirt farmer, and he is facing off against a Republican challenger, Tim Sheehy. To be clear, this race has stakes for the whole country.
So the Montana Senate race is most likely the hinge race for Democrats this year. So if Jon Tester loses, it's very likely that Democrats will lose control of the Senate.
But locally, it's a more personal decision. Gustafson is a Republican, but he has voted for Tester in the last two elections.
I think we have a lot in common, me and John with a lot of other people that do what I do. But I think...
This year, though, he is looking at the incumbent with a more critical eye.
Believe that Tester, he just seems to get too much lobbyist money, voted too much against my conservative values. I'm a rancher. I know he's a farmer and he helps the farmers and the veterans, but he has to do more than that. I think he has to represent Montana. And I know...
You know, here in Washington, everyone's talking about this race in terms of Senate control, right? Like, and what does that mean for taxes? What does that mean for healthcare, right? But when we got there to Montana, it felt like everyone was having this intensely personal kind of family discussion about Montana values. What does it mean to be from Montana? And that Jon Tester, the Democrat, and Tim Sheehy, the Republican, had become these sort of avatars of these struggles.
That's because over the years, Montana has changed a lot. It's attracted more people, some of whom are wealthy. It's gotten more expensive. And that influx has also changed the state's politics.
Thousands of people have flooded into this state of just 1.1 million people. And over the years, it's also gotten redder. It used to be a purple state. Sometimes they'd have a Democratic governor. Obviously, they had a Democratic senator in Jon Tester. And now Tester's the last Democrat in statewide office.
From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Martine Powers. It's Thursday, October 17th. Today, I talk with Liz about Montana's pivotal Senate race and about Jon Tester, one of the last Senate Democrats standing in a red state. We'll hear why this race reflects a big political shift that we've seen over the last decade. People who are no longer willing to vote for candidates outside their party. And we'll ask the question, can Jon Tester hang on? Also, just a note, in this episode, you're going to hear some colorful language. So, Liz, as you mentioned, this Senate race is critical. Right now, the breakdown in the Senate is 51-49 with Democrats having control. But as we know, Joe Manchin in West Virginia, he is retiring at the end of this term. And Democrats are basically resigning themselves to the fact that they are going to be losing that seat. However, when you look at Montana, that doesn't look so good for Democrats either, right? Because former President Donald Trump won Montana by a landslide last election. So I want to start by talking a little bit more about Jon Tester and who he is. Like, what kind of Democrat runs and also wins in a place that so heavily favors Republicans?
So Jon Tester is best described as just a character, I would say. He has a flat top haircut. He brags that it's $12, something like that. He goes to the same place he's always been to. He's missing 3 fingers from a childhood meat grinding accident.
Oh, wow.
He's still farming the land that his grandparents homesteaded in very rural Montana up past Big Sandy. His whole thing is radiating Montana. He's like a mascot of Montana, basically. And I think that's how he's managed to win, even as other Democrats have just bitten the dust as the state's gotten redder. People have given him the benefit of the doubt.
He is a good man, and you folks are good folks. You know, I can't go to Butte, and you guys have heard this damn story so many times, I feel guilty telling it, but I can't come to Butte.
Yeah, so we saw Tester at a rally in Butte. It was a small union hall off the main drag filled with, hardcore Tester fans, and he was really leaning on his biography there and stressing his Montana roots.
I can't come to Butte without remembering the first time I came to Butte. And it was when I was 13 years old, in 1969. My dad was going to buy a Cadillac at the Cadillac dealership, and we come off the top of that hill, and I saw trucks with tires on them as big as the combines we were operating. It was the damnedest thing I ever seen, I mean, we're talking.
So after Tester's rally in Butte, we talked to him briefly on the street outside. It was very windy.
I'm a Montanan. I understand their number one industry, agriculture. I understand how Main Street businesses are really important to this state. I understand how the middle class is driven by a vibrant labor movement. I understand.
And he said that he's confident that the Republicans who have backed him in Montana in the past are going to keep voting for him.
And all I got to say to Tim Sheehy, I got more experience. I've forgot more about farming and ranching than he'll ever know. And that's a fact. I come from a place where I know this state, and the truth is they try to make you into something you're not. But I ain't making Tim Sheehy into something he's not. He's not a stater. $100 millionaire has come here and has tried to buy this state, just like we've seen a lot of other folks do. I'm not going to sit by and let that happen.
So, Liz, you talked about the large number of people who have moved to Montana recently. But tell me a little bit more about how that has changed the politics of this state, or what are the political leanings of the people who have come to Montana more recently?
Yeah, so there's a debate right now about whether these new people who've come in, the thousands of people over the past few years, are more red or blue. I had one strategist tell me, you see a California license plate, you think that person's a Democrat. People are like, oh no, Californians are moving here and they're changing our state. But then if you talk to that Californian, they might say, actually, I moved here because I hate the politics in my blue state. And that's why I came here. And
I see. So they see Montana as kind of a conservative refuge.
Exactly. It's drawing them like a magnet. A lot of them are wealthier. Housing prices have gone up. So even there's a piece of it that's kind of a partisan dispute, but there's also a piece of it that's more about, class and identity. But on the other hand, the state hasn't had a big election since all of these newcomers have come that could kind of sort out who's who. So a lot of people see, how Tester performs and how Trump performs in this upcoming election as kind of the true test of who were these newcomers and how do they vote.
Interesting. So it sounds like the case that Tester is trying to make is, look, I've been around for a while. I'm a real Montanan, and this new guy, Tim Sheehy, he's not, and that's why you shouldn't vote for him. For the people who find Sheehy a very attractive candidate, who are planning to vote for him, what is the case for him? Tell me a little bit more about him and what is so appealing, the kind of flip side.
Sheehy's a top recruit. Republicans felt really great when they convinced him to run because he's a millionaire. He has a business, aerial firefighting business, and he's also a Navy SEAL.
I will never forget how I felt on 9/11. That fateful day motivated me to serve our nation as a Navy SEAL. I met my wife in the military, and we both served in Afghanistan.
And his wife was a Marine, so it's a family of military service. A lot of people really appreciate that in Montana. He has young kids, so he's sort of an attractive family picture. He's a lot younger than Tester. He's not even 40, so you know, he kind of like is photogenic. And I think that matters in politics. So he was seen as a very strong recruit when Republicans first convinced him to run.
Tim Sheehy, Navy SEAL, conservative family man, aerial firefighter, job creator, patriot.
I'm Tim Sheehy, and I approve this message because I will always put America first.
As a Republican, what is he like? What does he stand for?
One of the pluses of Sheehy from a purely political standpoint is he's never served in office before. So he doesn't really have a record he has to defend, which is helpful when, especially on abortion, when Republicans have been kind of running from some of their past positions. He has said that he's, against abortion, and that's something Tester's really going after him on. And he's also, in his stump speech, he mentions a lot, boys are boys and girls are girls, sort of like an anti-trans message is part of his like core stump speech. And then, he has a lower taxes mentality, kind of a standard, Republican agenda, I would say.
Does he have a relationship with former President Trump?
So Trump endorsed him in the primary, which was a big coup for him. He's come out to Bozeman and gave a campaign rally for him, even though it's a red state where he doesn't really need to show up. And that really boosted Sheehy among Republicans.
Were you able to get a sense of what Sheehy is like in public while you guys were in Montana?
So Sheehy has really been dodging the press. This is something that's happening not just to us, but to every reporter. The campaign wouldn't release a public schedule or let us talk to him, do an interview. And that's gone on at the same time as local and national outlets have broken some unflattering stories about him, including his business being in financial trouble. There are leaked comments he made at a campaign event saying that young women in the state are indoctrinated on the issue of abortion and that Native Americans were drunk in the morning. And then also, I broke a story about some questions around a gunshot wound he says that he sustained in Afghanistan. But in 2015, he told a park ranger in Glacier National Park that he had accidentally discharged a gun there and shot himself in the arm. I think these different news stories kind of calling into question Sheehy's honesty or record is definitely playing into this race. And Tester is using that to kind of make this case that he can't be trusted, which sort of fits into the larger argument about, not having Montana values that he's trying to make. But we do have a good sense of what Sheehy's message is because, he appeared at a recent debate. And at that debate, Sheehy had a very strong answer for Tester's charge that he's not a real Montanan.
Truth is, I wasn't lucky enough to be born in Montana. I sure would have loved to have been. Couldn't control where my mother's room was when I crawled out of it. I couldn't control when the military sent me for a decade. But I'm proud to say that when my wife and I left the service, we put down roots here. We started a company, created hundreds of jobs, and have tried to invest in the betterment of our community.
He also went on the offense against Tester and painted him as way too liberal for Montana.
Senator Tester's been in office many years. I thank him for his service. He also voted to impeach Donald Trump twice. Said on CNN we should punch him in the face. He voted with Biden and Harris every single time it mattered, voted against all Supreme Court judge nominees that came from the Trump administration, and has advocated to end the filibuster and expand the Supreme Court.
So in terms of this argument that Tester no longer fits for Montana, that sure, there was a time when Montanans wanted some Democrats in office. That is no longer the case. How does Tester counteract that? What does he say to these arguments that his politics no longer match the politics of the majority of the people who live in Montana?
So he talks a lot about being bipartisan and bipartisan pieces of legislation he's worked on, like the infrastructure bill that brought a lot of money back to Montana for roads and other projects. And he has been ranked as a very bipartisan senator by various groups that analyze that kind of thing. I think he's also really hit on abortion because that's something that Montanans overall support abortion rights. So that's something he's actually a little bit more in line with the population of Montana than Sheehy is right now. And there's also a measure on the ballot that would strengthen abortion rights in the state, which could motivate the pro-abortion rights people.
Talk to me about that. Why Montanans, by and large, support abortion rights?
So something we heard again and again when you interview voters is libertarian. Whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they all sort of, or not all of them, but many identify as libertarian. And there's kind of an ethos when you're talking about Montana values. One of them is sort of leaving people alone. And I think that's why they're a little bit unique on this abortion issue compared to like a red state, further south, for example.
Interesting. So they see the abortion issue and access to abortion rights as less of a progressive value, but more we just want the government to leave us alone and stay away from our bodies, and we get to decide for ourselves whether or not an abortion is something we want to engage in.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious where Tester's head is at in all this. As someone who has been a senator for Montana since, 2006? That's quite a while. And to be facing the potential that he is about to be voted out, did he get a sense of how he's feeling about that?
Yeah, I think there was definitely some frustration when he was in front of that Butte crowd, friendly kind of union crowd. He did mention this race shouldn't be close, but it is.
Nothing changed. It's going to be a close race. Don't ask me why. It shouldn't be a close race. My opponent's made plenty of mistakes, but the truth is it's still going to be a close race. Everybody's got to make sure their voices are heard. Everybody has to make sure their voices are heard.
There's a frustration he feels that polls have reflected that Sheehy is ahead of Tester by a few percentage points. And on the other side of the coin, the race has gotten personal as well. Sheehy has made fun of Tester's weight, and so has Trump. And it's not really on the issues right now, essentially. And you can kind of feel that resentment going both ways.
After the break, we hear more from Montana voters.
Yahoo!
We'll be right back. So, Liz, I know a big part of why you went out to Montana was to actually talk to voters there. And I'm particularly curious about a category of voter you mentioned earlier, the folks who have moved to Montana relatively recently. What did they have to say about this race?
Yeah, so we really wanted to talk to some Republicans and also find Sheehy, if at all possible. So we staked out a fundraiser at this place called the Big Yellow Barn in Belgrade, right near Bozeman. And it was a beautiful setting. Sort of like a wedding venue looking place. And they kind of had like a patio out back.
Like farmhouse chic.
Yes, farmhouse chic.
Okay.
Yes.
What a beautiful place to get married, huh?
I know, right?
Looks like they have little twinkle lights out back.
It's gorgeous.
That's so nice.
And then we went to the kind of the edge of this gravel parking lot where people, very dressed up people, were going into this fundraiser. And then we stopped and asked people if they were willing to chat.
Hi, guys. Hi. Hey, good. We're doing a podcast about the Senate race. Would anyone want to talk about it?
I think my friend here would love to.
And that's where we first met Rhonda Bernecki.
Okay, amazing. And you said you're relatively recent Montana.
We've been here 5.5 years, and we left California to get away from the politics.
Oh, okay.
So happy to be here. So we're just really happy for people like Sheehy and, Zinke.
She loves Sheehy, and she really doesn't like Tester.
He is going to win. It's definitely time to get rid of Tester, who has voted against Trump. He's voted against everything.
She really doesn't like that Tester votes with Democrats most of the time and also voted to impeach Trump.
You know, he acts like Biden made mistakes about the border, and he's acting like, he didn't do a good job when he was behind him all the way. He voted with him the whole time.
So we also met transplants, people who had moved to Montana who didn't like Sheehy and, did back Tester. So at that same truck stop where we met Wiley, we talked to Joey Barron.
Yeah, I'm Joey. I'm in Helena, and I'm an engineer and trying to keep our roads safe and designed well. And I just love people. I love Jesus. Love the Lord. That's super important.
He's in his late 20s, and he said that he firsthand knows that being a transplant to Montana can lead people to kind of treat you harshly or see you as an outsider.
I grew up in a different state and been here for the last 8 years. So I get what it's like to be out of state and kind of be bashed a little bit and not as welcome right away, but I didn't come here to change anything. I'm just trying to live out the Montana values and love what we have here. So
Joey is obviously someone like Tim Sheehy, who is a transplant. And, we were curious if maybe he would be alienated by Tester's message that, he's a real Montanan and Sheehy and other outsiders are trying to, ruin the state. But it seemed like Joey was not offended by that message at all and kind of understood what he was trying to say about Sheehy.
So he's going to vote for Tester?
Yes, he's a Tester voter, and he's also going to vote for Kamala Harris.
All right. So both of these people seem like they're straight ticket voters, like a Democrat who's going to vote for Democrats up and down the ballot, a Republican who's just going to be voting for Republicans. But it seems like part of why Tester has been politically successful up until this point is his ability to appeal across the aisle and appeal to moderate Republicans. And it seems like a big question in this election is, does that appeal exist anymore? So I'm wondering, what about the moderate Republicans that you talked to? What did they say about whether or not they were considering voting for Tester?
Yeah, so the question of this election is basically like, do you care about the fact that someone's an authentic Montanan or has served your state over the years? Or do you care more about who's on your team? Are you just kind of putting on your jersey? And especially in a presidential election year, do you just kind of want to go and vote for your team and up and down the ballot? So we heard some people kind of thinking through that.
My name's Don Seifert. I'm a former Gallatin County Commissioner.
Don Seifert is a Republican. He's the former county commissioner of Gallatin County, and he voted for Trump back in 2016.
I looked at him as to use a Wild West term, a gunslinger, right? He's the guy that's going to come into town and he's going to get rid of all this stuff. He's a gunslinger, right? And I thought, maybe we need a gunslinger, right?
He thought that maybe he would just shake things up and bring change to sort of a sluggish system that wasn't as responsive to voters' concerns. He still identifies as a Republican, but he actually turned against Trump over his time in office and did not vote for him in 2020.
I don't think we need that kind of a gunslinger,
So he's also supported Tester over the years. He's actually one of the co-chairs, I believe, of Republicans for Tester, which is part of their campaign's effort to get more Republicans to vote for him.
I've only really met Jon 2 or 3 times, but I just like the way he works. He, works across the aisle to do stuff, and he does it in a low-key manner,
And, he says he thinks that he's just an effective senator, and he likes the way he's served. But then he said something that we found really fascinating.
But, would I put a Tester sign in my driveway? Probably not, because I live in a kind of a conservative neighborhood, and I don't want to get harassed for it. But definitely when I go inside to the booth, circling Jon's name.
Interesting. What did you make of that? The fact that he said, I'm voting for this guy, but I wouldn't put a sign up in my yard to say that I'm voting for this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of speaks to the atmosphere there now where, even someone who has a history of attracting a big chunk of Republican voters like Jon Tester, it's just kind of a tense environment to put a sign like that up in your yard, even if you're officially supporting the campaign like Don is. And part of that is, Trump going there and making defeating Tester a priority, I think. And the fact that it is a presidential year, people just get more worked up. And, Biden is very unpopular.
It's interesting because it feels like, from what you're describing and from some of the voices that we've been hearing in this conversation, it feels like there has been a shift for Republicans in Montana that in some ways reflects a shift that we've been seeing nationally for Republicans, that in the past there used to be a certain pride in the ability to, look past the R or the D at the end of someone's name and to interrogate them just on their own personal qualities or their qualities as a politician. And that these Montanans thought that it was kind of part of their identity that they could be a Republican and yet still vote for a Democrat in the Senate because they thought that he was just like a particularly good leader. But that isn't the case anymore. It seems like it's a lot harder for someone like Don, who's afraid to put a lawn sign on his lawn, right? That the ability to be a Republican who even considers voting for a Democrat is just a choice that's kind of intolerable for a lot of people at this point.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think split ticket voting used to just be a huge part of the process. At its high water mark in the 70s, it was like a third of voters would vote, down ballot, a different party than they voted for president. And so the Senate was filled with people from, red or blue states, and they were part of the opposite party, and they had to kind of be a little more bipartisan so that their voters wouldn't get mad at them. And it really affected the dynamic of the Senate, that there were so many people like Jon Tester there. And now they're just becoming a bit more of an endangered species. Like starting basically in 2016, split ticket voters got to a low water mark, I think of like 7%, very low percent of people voted not straight down, straight blue or straight red. And that's something that in Montana they were holding on to in part because Tester just has this unique connection to voters and was able to survive even in 2018. And that's the question now of is the road kind of over there for him?
Well, so based on the conversations that you had and your reporting actually being in Montana, what is your sense of his chances in this race?
I think the problem for Tester right now is he is losing some voters who are conservative, but kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt because they liked him. And he has very strong constituent services. So people felt like he's a good senator locally. The polls there are really bearing that out. There was a recent New York Times Siena poll that had him down 7 percentage points in the state. And that's in line with a lot of other public polling that's shown him down, single digits, but significantly, almost to 10.
Wow.
And that's, in past races in 2018, a lot of polls showed him narrowly ahead. So that's why I think Republicans are starting to feel more confident there. But no one's like pulling money out. Like Democrats and Republicans are staying in because for Democrats, they just don't have a lot of other options to keep the majority. And for Republicans, they don't want to take any chances because this guy has slipped away in the past. So the outlook for Tester is not great right now. And, Wiley Gustafson, who we talked about earlier,
Yahoo!
He knows Jon Tester very well. He likes Jon Tester, but he decided he's not voting for him this time.
Yes. He helped me get my adopted son from the Philippines. So John and I are on a first name basis. So, like I said, I've been voting for Jon for a long time now. So this time it's different.
Yeah, so that's a big step then if you...
It is. And so maybe there's a little bit of guilt involved, but not going with Jon this time because I think Jon's a good guy. And
that's so interesting that he's like, I think Jon's a good guy, and yet he's not going to vote for him.
Yeah, and the idea of guilt, right? Like that's how much Tester has built these personal connections with voters in the state, including Republican voters. But, he's pretty clear that he just couldn't do it this time.
Wow. So what do you think that tells you about the current state of play in Montana and even nationally?
Yeah, I think Tester just needs a lot of Wileys to win this race, because it is a Trump plus 16 state. So he needs, 16% of the electorate to split their ballots. And that's just a hard situation for any candidate to be in. And in this polarized age, it's just a lot. It's asking a lot of Montanans. Even in a small state where it's almost possible to kind of meet everybody, Like it felt like Tester had almost every voter we talked to either had met Tester personally or they had a friend or a relative who had met Tester personally. And people really talked about him as Jon. It was no one said Senator Tester in this whole state. A lot of people had personal stories about something he had done for them, like Wiley's story about the adoption, or we met another guy who said he had helped him with some legislation helping blind people. But even under those circumstances where you can almost get to know, half the electorate, it's just very hard to overcome the polarization right now. And, that personal connection, it doesn't feel like it's enough.
Liz, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Liz Goodwin covers Congress for The Post. She reported the story with producer Laura Benshaw. Before we go, some news from Gaza. Today, Israel announced its military killed Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Sinwar was the chief architect of the October 7th attacks, and he has been at the top of Israel's hit list. He's believed to have spent much of the past year hiding in underground tunnels in the Gaza Strip. Now, Israel says that he was one of 3 Hamas militants they killed during a recent operation. Officials told the Post that his death was confirmed after dental tests and DNA analysis. This is a significant moment in Israel's offensive against Hamas. But it's unclear what it will mean for the fate of the remaining hostages in Gaza and for the future of the war. And we have a follow-up to a story we did on the podcast earlier this year about efforts to ban international surrogacy in Italy.
I have had the same passions for babies since I was young, but I stopped the idea when I was in peace with myself that I was gay. So I said, okay, if it's not possible, probably my life is not to be a father.
That's Luca Capuano, who we featured in that episode. We heard about how he and his partner in Italy were ultimately able to have a child through an American surrogate, and that they were hoping to have another one. But on Wednesday, Italy's far-right government passed a law that outlaws international surrogacy. This effectively bars gay couples from becoming parents, as domestic surrogacy is already banned in Italy, and same-sex couples are barred from adoption. That's it for today's episode of Post Reports. Thanks for listening. And we would love to hear from you. We've got an email address. It's postreports@washpost.com. So if you've got thoughts on a story that you heard on the podcast, you liked it, you didn't like it, you have questions that would make for another good episode, send them over to us. Again, that's at postreports@washpost.com. Today's show was produced by Laura Benshaw, with help from Emma Talkoff. It was mixed by Sean Carter and edited by Rena Flores, with help from Ariel Plotnick. Thanks also to Emily Rahala and Jesse Messner-Hage. I'm Martine Powers. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from the Washington Post.